I'm Lynn DeLisi. I have the honor of being your president this year and next year, and I want to welcome you all to the United States of America and also to Orlando. And I hope this meeting is very successful for everyone scientifically and just a meeting that's a lot of relaxation and fun as well. I also would like to say that this is a very historic moment for SIRS. And I want to let you know that it's been a lot of work and particularly committee work, but we managed to combine very thoughtfully with the former ICOSR in order to bring SIRS and the society, the scientific community together worldwide. And I think we'll look back on 2019 and really celebrate that we've unified the world in schizophrenia research. So with that, I'd like to thank particularly Parthenon for making our society possible, the whole structure of the society. They drive us. They are a remarkable force of energy, particularly Sarah Tim. Sarah, could you just stand up because you do a fantastic job, and as well as Sarah's team, and particularly Lindsay is here, who is so calm and remarkable. My sending her constant emails every 5 minutes, and she's just very complacent about it and manages to handle it as well. So thank you, Lindsay. And finally, I really want to particularly thank Raquel Gurr and Paula Dazan. Both are the co-chairs of this meeting, and they've put together an excellent, absolutely fantastic scientific session, and they worked very, very hard to do that. Paula and Raquel, would you mind standing up so everyone recognizes you? Okay, so I've taken it very seriously, being president of the society, and when I first began, I had a vision of what I was going to accomplish in the 2 years, and I don't have a pointer, but I want to point out with my finger that the first thing was I wanted to emphasize diversity, and I feel very strongly that there should be gender diversity, there should be age diversity, there should be geographic diversity in this society, and we have to make it happen. And so in order to do that, we've established a task force that has been very active under, let's see, is Dr. Park here, who's been running this remarkably well, and you'll hear more about the Diversity Task Force. There's even a session on diversity in the program. So that's one thing. The other thing that I'm extremely excited about is I've been trying to raise money so that the society can have a research award, a direct research award given to anyone, regardless of whether they're young or old, someone who has a great creative idea but no money to do it. And so we're announcing this award at this meeting, and I'll tell you a little more about it in a second. And the third thing that I really wanted to do was emphasize collaboration in the society. And I think the society is a good mechanism for allowing people to come together and share and develop collaborations, such as the many collaborations that we already have in the field like the Psychiatric Genetics Consortium, numerous ones now that are being developed. But by somehow getting people together, both who need collaborations, who need collaborators, and having a society that can somehow facilitate this is very important. So that was the third thing, and actually there's a fourth thing. We want to recognize the accomplishments of our members in the society. And in order for me to do that, this year we've established something new. Well, before I get to that, this is our announcement for our Research Fund Award, and we are accepting applications. There will be instructions on the SIRS website. You need to be a member of the society to apply for the award. And a deadline is going to be sometime in June, and we will have a committee that will decide on the awards. We hope to give the first award in the fall. And hopefully not the next meeting, but the meeting after that, whoever gets the award will present their data at our meeting. So the other thing is that we've established for the first time this year the President's Award. And this is an award where whoever is president, and this year it's me, can really think about who in the field I really, really want to honor this year. And I thought about a number of people who could be a role model for young women or young men in the field, who is a real pioneer in research and has really done a lot of work to advance our knowledge about schizophrenia, and yet has been extremely collaborative and community-oriented. And to be honest, I can think of no better person than Carol Tsuminga. And I am just awed by all that Carol has done in her career. She's just a remarkable woman, a role model for many people. She has, for example, currently she's chairperson of the Department of Psychiatry at Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. She was president of the ACMP. She was president of biological psychiatry. In the US, it's very prestigious to be elected to the National Academy of Medicine, which she was. I consider the Lieber Award the Nobel of schizophrenia research, and Carol achieved that. And she's on numerous councils and advisory committees. But the reason most of you probably know Carol is because she was the co-founder of the ICOSR and organizer along with Chuck Schultz. And many of you, I imagine, have spent your careers at the ICOSR meeting and really grown up over the 30 years that it's been in existence. There were 16 congresses. Most of them were in Colorado Springs, and there's a view of the beautiful area of the hotel there. Even though it was a bit colder than here in Florida, it was a wonderful place to have meetings. And I have to tell you that I get very sentimental, and so Sarah Tim lent me the archives of all the pictures from the ICOSR, and so I'm just going to flash a few of them forward for you. And there's Carol and Chuck at the first meeting in Clearwater, and actually the first meeting was in Florida. And there is Phil Holtzman and Arvid Carlson, who came to our meetings regularly. And Carol was a close colleague of Arvid, and there's Arvid with his wife. And there is Chuck and Carol, the way they always looked, always smiling. And there's Larry Seidman with Jill Goldstein, Jan Stevens with Stephen Hirsch and Carol in the background, and Irv Gottesman and Hockenheimer. And there is our beloved Pat Goldman-Rakish with Dan Weinberger. And I don't have to tell you who this is. I happened to find that picture in the archives. And I got very excited when I found this because it was certainly an alternative way to get grant funding, and we were able to play very successfully. There are the Liebers who have donated their lives to our cause. And there's Carol and Chuck in Savannah. Now, Savannah was the year that SIRS was, we had a very crucial meeting in Savannah, and SIRS was incorporated in 2005. And there's Carol and Chuck being honored. And that's not all Carol did. I don't want you to think that she's on all these committees, et cetera. She's really published over 400 research papers. She started with the treatment of tardive dyskinesia. She studied, she's really known for her work with ketamine and schizophrenia, GABA and glutamate. She published a model of hippocampal dysfunction in schizophrenia. But most recently, through the BSNP collaborative effort, she's been a real leader in this collaboration. Just published an important paper on biological reclassification of the psychoses, which comes out of that collaborative. And lastly, I just want to say that Carol has a chapter in this wonderful book. I don't know if Sophia Frangu is here right now, but she wrote this book about women in academic psychiatry and had a lot of us write chapters about our careers. And Carol was one of them, and I picked a few quotes from this because Carol had the philosophy that even though life deals out many hard situations, never give up, never give up. And Carol never gave up, and she's really had a remarkable career and still does. And unfortunately, because she's chair of a department and has a lot of responsibility in Texas, she couldn't make it because her dean called a meeting in the last minute. She was going to come. And so she's asked Will Carpenter, who is a very close colleague for many years of hers, to come up and accept the award for her. Now we have to, whoops. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not allowed to speak, but if I were, I would add 25 wonderful years she had with us at the MPRC. She was just fantastic there, getting off the ground and doing well. This is terrific honor for her.
Yeah, well, she deserves it. So, thank you, Will. So now I want to turn the prize awards over to Vera Morgan. Unfortunately, Celso Arango, who is also co-chair of the prize committee, is stuck in customs, and I just hope he gets through. But meanwhile, Vera, could you?
Thank you, Lynn. This is the fourth year that the Society is honouring individuals in the field of schizophrenia research, and we thank all of you who submitted nominations. First, I want to thank the SIRS 2019 Awards Committee, Celso Arango, who's chair of the committee. I'm Vera Morgan, Anne Bassett, Stefan Borgward, David Braff, Robin Emsley, Henry Nasrallah, Christos Pantelis, and Till Wicks. We'll start off with the SIRS Distinguished Service Award. This award recognises a member of the Society who has provided extraordinary service to the field of schizophrenia. This service may be through leadership in this or other societies, through journalism, or in the education of professionals or the public through community service. The first Distinguished Service Award recipient for 2019 is Jean Addington. Dr. Addington is Professor of Psychiatry at the University of Calgary in Alberta, Canada, where she holds the Novartis Chair for Schizophrenia Research. She is one of the principal investigators in the North American Prodrome longitudinal study and holds an NIMH grant to determine predictors and mechanisms of developing psychosis. She leads an NIMH-funded RCT of cognitive behavioural social skills training for the clinically high risk. Currently, her major research focus is the examination of predictors of conversion to psychosis and the development of psychosocial interventions for those at clinical high risk of developing psychosis. Congratulations, Dr. Addington. The second Distinguished Service Award recipient for 2019 is John Kane. Dr. Kane will not be in attendance today, and Dr. Anil Malhotra will be receiving the award on his behalf. Dr. Kane is Senior Vice President for Behavioural Health Services at Northwell Health. He is Professor and Chairman of Psychiatry at the Donald and Barbara Zucker School of Medicine in New York and Chairman of Psychiatry at the Zucker Hillside Hospital in Glen Oaks, New York. He has served as President of the American Society of Clinical Psychopharmacology and the Schizophrenia International Research Society. Dr. Kane has been the principal investigator for 19 NIMH-funded research projects focusing on schizophrenia psychobiology, treatment and recovery, as well as improving the timeliness, quality and cost of care. Congratulations to Dr. Kane. Our next award is the Outstanding Basic Research Award. This award is given in recognition of an outstanding basic research contribution to schizophrenia research. The contribution may be preclinical or work which emphasises the interface between basic and clinical research. The selection of the award recipient is based on the quality of the contributions and its impact on advancing schizophrenia research. The Outstanding Basic Research Award recipient for 2019 is Brian Dean. Dr. Brian Dean is Head of Molecular Psychiatry at the Florey and Professorial Research Fellow at the Centre for Mental Health, Swinburne University in Australia. His major interest lies in understanding how challenges in cellular biology can affect brain function to cause the symptoms of schizophrenia. His lab is currently using a newly synthesized PET muscarinic receptor radioligand to study CNS receptor levels in schizophrenia and to use a newly developed technology to develop a diagnostic test for the disorder. Congratulations to Dr. Dean. Our next award is the Outstanding Clinical Community Research Award. This award is given in recognition of an outstanding clinical community contribution to schizophrenia research and may be based on a single discovery or a cumulative body of work. The Outstanding Clinical Community Research Award recipient for 2019 is Keith Nerkteline. Dr. Keith Nerkteline is a distinguished professor in the departments of psychiatry and biobehavioral sciences and of psychology at the University of California, Los Angeles. He serves as the director of the UCLA Aftercare Research Program. One of his primary research efforts involves the multidisciplinary longitudinal studies of contributors to and interventions for the early course of schizophrenia, with particular emphasis on cognition and functional outcome. He has demonstrated the significant contributions of supported employment, education, cognitive training, aerobic exercise, and long-acting antipsychotic medications for improving clinical outcome, cognition, and work recovery in early phases of schizophrenia. Congratulations, Dr. Nick Tulane. Our next award is the Outstanding Translation Research Award. This award is given to a SIRS member in recognition of an outstanding translational science contribution to schizophrenia research. The contribution may be based on a single discovery or a cumulative body of work. The Outstanding Translational Research Award for 2019 is awarded to the team of Raquel and Ruben Gurr. So starting with Dr. Raquel Gurr, she's the Carl and Linda Rickles Professor of Psychiatry, Vice Chair for CHOP Penn Research Integration, Co-Director of the Penn Translational Neuroscience Centre, and Director of the Lifespan Brain Institute at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine and the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She holds secondary professional appointments in the departments of neurology and radiology. Her combined training in psychology, neurology, and psychiatry has provided the tools to pursue an academic career working with basic and clinical neuroscientists to advance the understanding of schizophrenia. Congratulations, Dr. Gurr. And moving on to Dr. Ruben Gurr, he is a professor in the departments of psychiatry, radiology, and neurology, and director of the Brain Behaviour Laboratory and the Centre for Neuroimaging and Psychiatry. He has developed tools for deep phenotyping of brain and behavioural parameters using computerised acquisition tools that can integrate clinical and neurocognitive measures with neuroimaging and genomic data within the framework of large multi-centre studies. His work has documented sex differences, ageing effects, and abnormalities in regional brain function associated with schizophrenia, affective disorders, stroke, epilepsy, movement disorders, and dementia. Congratulations, Dr. Our next award is the Rising Star Award, which is given to an early career researcher who is less than 40 years of age by 10th April 2019 or within 5 years postdoc. Requirements for consideration include the application and CV, a letter of recommendation from a SIRS member, a personal statement including career goals, and an abstract submission for presentation at the 2019 Congress. We have several awardees. The first Rising Star awardee for 2019 is Gemma Medinos. Gemma is an honorary senior lecturer in the departments of Psychosis Studies and Neuroimaging at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, and visiting scholar at Professor Anthony Grace's lab at the University of Pittsburgh. She has started her own lab at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, combining multimodal neuroimaging methods in humans and animal models to ask questions about the interactions between neurochemistry, neurophysiology and neuroanatomy in the development of psychosis, with a focus on brain circuits involved in emotional processing. Congratulations, Dr. Medinos. The second Rising Star awardee for 2019 is Panos Roussos. And, Dr. Roussos can't be in attendance today. I believe his wife has gone into labour. and Dr. Kiran Gidar will be receiving the award on his behalf. Is Dr. Gidar here? We'll put it to one side, but let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Roussos. He's an Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Genetics and Genomic Sciences at the Arkan School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. His research focuses on the integration of high-dimensional data such as genomic, epigenomic, and transcriptomic, using advanced biostatistical methods in order to identify some of the mechanisms through which risk genetic variants increase the risk for neuropsychiatric diseases. So congratulations to Dr. Roussos. Our third and last Rising Star awardee for 2019 is Jared Young. Dr. Young Dr. Young is an Associate Professor in Residence at the University of California, San Diego. His research includes identifying neural mechanisms underlying cognitive dysfunction for people living with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, substance use disorders, and HIV. Congratulations, Dr. Young. The SIRS Global Schizophrenia Research Award is a new award supporting a SIRS member in a developing country to attend the annual SIRS meeting. The awardee must be a SIRS member, this includes 2019 members, and from the World Bank country categories Group B, C or D. The recipient receives waived registration fees, hotel accommodation and coach fare paid by SIRS. Our first Global Schizophrenia Research Awardee for 2019 is Alexandra Loch. Dr. Loch is a staff psychiatrist at the Institute of Psychiatry, University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. His current research is the Subclinical Symptoms and Psychosis Prodrome project, which examines individuals at ultra-high risk for psychosis in the city of Sao Paulo. Congratulations, Dr. Loch. Our second Global Schizophrenia Research Awardee for 2019 is Alexandra Zugno. Dr. Zugno is Dr. Zugno? Dr. Zugno is a professor and researcher for the postgraduation course in health sciences. Her research studies the pathology and mechanisms of schizophrenia using various animal models. Congratulations, Dr. Zugno. Our final award tonight is the SIRS Lifetime Achievement Award. The Lifetime Achievement Award is given to a scientist and a SIRS member who has made a significant contribution to the advancement of the field of schizophrenia research. He or she must have an established history in schizophrenia research, exhibited leadership, and provided mentoring to young investigators and positively impacted on the field of schizophrenia research. The 2019 Lifetime Achievement Award is presented to William Carpenter. Dr. Carpenter is a professor of the University of Maryland School of Medicine and past director of the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center. His professional interest includes phenomenology, etiology, pathophysiology, anatomy and treatment. He has made original and fundamental contributions in psychopathology, assessment methodology, testing of novel treatments, research ethics, and a lot more that's not added here. Congratulations, Dr. Carpenter.
Two quick comments. I have two loves. One is sharing this field with you in the care and study of persons with schizophrenia. And the other that made my life so good is the family. My wife and daughter are here.
Okay. So now we go on to our keynote speaker of the evening. And this is a tradition that we established way back in 2008 when we had our first meeting, that we would have someone unique who has really made an impact on us or the field somehow, really open our meeting with a keynote address. And this year, I felt very strongly that we ought to have someone, because we were coming to Florida and to Orlando, where not so long ago there was a lot of violence in a nightclub and people died. And then shortly, about a year ago when we were first planning this meeting, unfortunately, there was a terrible tragedy in a high school about 3 hours southeast of here that killed too many students. And particularly in that event, there was a lot of talk about mental illness and how it was related to violence. And so I asked Phil Harvey, who is at the University of Miami, if he could suggest someone local who has really had an impact on mental health in the criminal system in Florida. And he suggested Judge Leifman, who I have been reading about in the newspapers and saw on talk shows and on TV. He is an enormously important judge in the state of Florida. He has currently is Associate Administrative Judge of the Miami-Dade County Court in the criminal division, but he served and led several important Florida committees on mental health and the criminal justice system. He's written many policies and articles on mental illness in the criminal justice system in Florida, and he wrote policies responsible for transforming Florida's mental health system. He's received numerous awards. It would take me an hour to list many of them, including the Rehnquist Award given by the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, which is quite an honor. And he's been featured on numerous TV talk shows and in newspaper articles. Judge Leifman, if you can come, we're honored to have you speaking.
Good evening. Usually when I'm speaking, it's good morning, but I appreciate the dedication of all of you and your willingness to meet at night and to continue for the next few days, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here. You do remarkable work, and I hope one day you will do even better work and find better treatments or a cure for these illnesses so we could stop using the criminal justice system as the main place for people with mental illnesses in this country. What you learn after being on the bench for several years is that the criminal justice system is really nothing more than the repository of all failed public policy. And there has been nothing more of failed public policy in this country than how we treat people with serious mental illnesses. It's really not that complicated. When you use a criminal justice model and apply it to an illness, nobody should be surprised we have failed so miserably. When I was 17 years old, I was an intern for a state legislator here in Florida, and he had received a letter from the then editor of the Miami Herald about a young man who was in our local state psychiatric hospital. You see, my age directly corresponds to the deinstitutionalization movement in this country. The letter went something like, there was a young man at the state hospital. They thought he was being mistreated, and could the senator please come and check out this horrible situation? Now, being the lowest person on the totem pole, I got selected to go to the state hospital. I grew up in a nice middle-class Jewish family. I had never seen anything bad in my life until I walked through the doors of the state hospital. This is 43 years ago. I remember it like yesterday. It was everything you've seen in the horror movies, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I found the young man that we were there to investigate. He was in a bed. He was in all 4-point restraints. He was being injected with, I imagine, Thorazine. And he was screaming and crying and moaning and groaning, and it was a horrifying sight. It was well before HIPAA, so I pulled his files. I started to review his medical files. I talked to the staff, and what I found shocked me. Not only was he not psychotic, he was autistic, which is part of the reason we ended up shutting down the hospitals. But while I was there, it turned out that there was a group of advocates in the facility that day, and they heard that there was a representative from a legislator's office, albeit a 17-year-old who knew very little and had no power. But they were very excited that someone from an agency like a legislator's office was there to visit. So they insisted that I go on a tour of this facility, and they took me downstairs, which even today I remember vividly. It looked like a dungeon where I found 7 men lying naked in their own feces while a guard stood there with a hose washing them down. And all I could think at that moment is, my God, we treat animals in the zoo better than we're treating these human beings. About 17 years later, I was appointed to the bench, and the same horrors that I had seen at that hospital 17 years earlier were now going on across the street in my local jail. I had no idea that when I became a judge, I was actually becoming the gatekeeper to Florida's largest psychiatric facility in the state, that being the Miami-Dade County Jail. While the United States has 5% of the world's population, we have 25% of the world's inmates. Think about that a minute. As we sit here this evening, 1 out of 104 adults in the United States are behind bars. 1 out of 33 adults in the United States are under correctional supervision. Since 1980, the number of people going to jail in this country has tripled, and their sentences have increased by 166%. And as you drill down deeper, as you peel back that onion, what you will find is that most of this is due to untreated mental illness and substance use disorders. In fact, people with mental illnesses in the United States are 9 times more likely to be incarcerated than hospitalized. They're 18 times more likely to find a bed in jail than at any state civil hospital. And annually, we have almost 2 million people with serious mental illnesses arrested each year. And on any given day, there are almost 400,000 people with serious mental illnesses in jail and another 800,000 under correctional supervision. 40% of all people with serious mental illnesses in this country at some point will come into contact with the criminal justice system. This is a shameful American tragedy, and it is one that must and can be reversed. And if the immorality of the situation doesn't bother you, the cost should. Last year, the counties in the United States collectively spent over $80 billion in correctional costs. It's getting so bad for some counties, they're now having to decide, do I build a new jail or a new school? Do I build a new jail or a new hospital? Do I build a new road or a new jail? our states are spending an additional $71 billion a year on prison cost. I want to show you a short video that was produced by my local CBS affiliate that does both a wonderful and horrible job of describing the situation.
Now, live, this is CBS 4 News at 11.
Life here is dirty, deplorable, dangerous. Tonight, CBS 4 takes you to a place cameras are rarely allowed to reveal what's happening in our downtown jail to the inmates on the forgotten floor.
The people who spend their days and nights in these jail cells all suffer from mental illness. They're accused criminals, not guilty in the eyes of the law, but forced to live in conditions you cannot imagine.
Our chief investigative reporter, Michelle Gillen, has been given unprecedented television access to reveal what's going on. Michelle joins us now, and I was shocked, to say the least, when I saw this.
I think certainly it is time for the public to see what is going on. The pictures you are about to see are indeed haunting and most disturbing. Hundreds of men with mental illnesses, many crammed into tiny cells. Some arrested for minor crimes that advocates say would have the average person out of jail in just hours. But incredibly, there is no place to send them. Tonight, our cameras take you inside a world rarely exposed, the forgotten floor.
And then they get thrown into a cell.
I can't breathe that now.
Prison insiders call this the forgotten floor, but it seems unimaginable that the horrendous, be it horrifying conditions of a jail spilling over with inmates suffering from mental illnesses could be erased from any sane man's mind. As frigid air is pumped into sealed cells, some beg for help for the barest of necessities, water. The faucets are dry.
The water's not working.
The water's not working. He's drinking sewer water. He's drinking toilet water out of the toilet.
We'll get you water. It doesn't work, the faucets. The faucets aren't working.
These stench-filled cells were designed for one person, outfitted with only a single steel shelf for a bed.
In this one, there's 3 inmates in a cell for one.
Yet 2, 3, sometimes even 5 men diagnosed with mental illnesses, in most cases arrested for low-level felony crimes, in some cases misdemeanors, are locked up for days, weeks, months.
Tell me about you. Tell me, living in this, what do you want the public to know tonight?
I want the public to know that people in here, they're urinating on the floor, and we have to sleep on top of it. They're defecating on the floor, and you have to sleep on top of it. There's only one bunker that's made of steel.
And how many people are in your cell?
There is 4 in here right now.
They are only allowed out of their cell for 15 minutes 2 times a week.
30 minutes a week they're allowed out.
So other than a half an hour,
That's it.
this is it. They
Right.
are in this room.
Lights are on 24/7. The conditions you see just do not change.
I've been in Vietnam. I've been in Vietnam after 18 months of Vietnam. It's worse conditions in here. I wouldn't put a dog in here.
A chilling perspective from the jail's chief psychiatrist, Dr. Joseph Portier.
You would think that in 2006, we would treat people with chronic mental illness in a much better, more humane manner. But unfortunately, we're reverting back to how it was in the 16 and 1700s, which is terrible. It's morally incomprehensible.
A sentiment echoed by an outraged Miami-Dade County judge, Steve Leifman.
This is like a secret that people don't
Yeah,
know
it's a
about.
bad secret. And it's a sad secret.
What most of you don't know is that the Miami-Dade jail now serves as the largest psychiatric facility in the state of Florida. 3 of 9 floors, burgeoning with inmates suffering from mental illnesses, and according to Leifman, in desperate need of treatment. Not this type of confinement designed to punish people.
5 times as many people in our jail with mental illness than any psychiatric hospital in Florida. 5 times.
In this, right here.
Right here.
An elderly man emerges from the dirt and darkness.
There's one on the floor underneath the bunk and one or two standing around waiting for their turn to sleep.
And the crisis has unfolded across the state. In other Florida jails where they strive to comply with all the national standards for housing inmates, frustration over the virtual abandonment of mentally ill inmates left by the state to languish in jail cells for months runs deep. Colonel David Parrish.
Can you imagine the chaos that would result in the local criminal justice system if I stood at the booking door and said, sorry, we don't have any more room, we're not taking them from you, law enforcement?
Parrish from Hillsborough County says local authorities had no choice but to sue the state of Florida to force the Department of Children and Families to comply with their legal mandate to transfer mentally ill inmates to a treatment facility within 15 days.
Jails should not be the de facto mental health facility for a county, but that's what they are in the United States.
You had your birthday here. How old were you?
I was 21.
21.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've been here 8 months.
In Pinellas County, the weight of incarcerating and caring for mentally ill inmates had everyone paying a price, an unacceptable one, according to Major Kirk Brunner.
We are not a treatment facility, and these people that you saw in Delta 1, the one that plucked his eye out, they need to be in a treatment facility, which is the responsibility of the state, not our responsibility.
And therein lies the danger. William Weaver Sr. was caring for his 40-year-old son Bill at home, a son he says suffered from schizophrenia but functioned well for decades until his medicine was changed. Then one night, according to police records, he attacked his elderly father, who called police and urged them to arrest his son, hoping this would trigger treatment.
Because he was under the false idea that if he got arrested, he'd get treatment.
Bill ended up locked up in a cell on floor 9 of the Miami-Dade Pretrial Detention Center for several months. According to authorities, Bill jumped from this top bunk bed, cracking his skull and breaking his neck. He's now a quadriplegic who needs hospitalization to stay alive. We met up with his father, who had just left his hospital bed.
Do you think anything has come from what the incident of what your son went through?
Nothing. Nothing's changed. Do I think something could change? I don't know. I don't know. It's time. It's time something changed. But I don't know if it ever will.
It's a pretty tragic look at the state of our mental health system, not just in Miami-Dade, but pretty much all across the United States. Tragically, the young man in the video passed away recently as a result of his injuries, and we think his father may have passed soon thereafter, probably from a broken heart. But things do change. That horrible, forgotten 9th floor was shut down, and we opened a much more appropriate facility for people with mental illnesses in our jail. But the answer isn't building better jails. The answer is building better systems of care so people with these illnesses don't come into our custody to begin with. My journey into the mental health world actually began one morning when I was getting ready to go on the bench. I was approached by the assistant public defender and the assistant state attorney, and they asked me if I would speak to a couple whose son was in jail on a case I was about to hear. At the time, I was handling a misdemeanor jail division, which means these are people in custody who have committed the least of offenses. And there are 3 kinds of people in that division. There are those that have attached felonies, so they're not allowed out of custody. There are those that are too poor and they cannot afford to bond out of custody. But mostly it's those with mental illnesses that just don't know how to get out of custody. And so the lawyers came to see me and told me that this couple was there and I needed to talk to them. And so this lovely couple came into my chambers and they were very distraught. The dad was shaking, the mom was crying, and they literally began to beg me to get their son help. He was in the division on a case I was about to hear. I don't even think it was a statutory offense. I think he was in on something like possession of a dairy cart, which a lot of homeless get picked up because the police pick them up, often because they also think they could get people help by getting them arrested. So this lovely couple started to tell me about their son. He was brilliant. He had gone to Harvard. He had a late onset of schizophrenia and was now homeless and recycling through our criminal justice system. I was pretty new at the time, and I think when you're a new judge, you think you have a lot more wisdom and a lot more power than you really do. And I made the mistake of promising them that I would get their son help, because I was under this false impression. I was under this illusion that if you got arrested and you had a serious mental illness, there must be some type of system of care, because I deal in logic. And I knew that if somebody got arrested and had a heart attack or cancer, we clearly had a system of care for them, and the same must be true for people with mental illnesses. So I made a pretty big mistake, and I promised them that I would get their son help. I was the judge. I could do anything. As I started to go into the courtroom, the mom stopped me and said, "Judge, there's one more thing I need to tell you about my son." She said, "Not only is he brilliant, but respectfully, he probably knows more about the mental health system than you do." I looked at her. I was confused. And I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Well, you see, my son is a former psychiatrist that worked at Jackson Memorial Hospital." I was pretty taken back. I went into the courtroom and I called his case. And we started to have an amazing conversation. He was coherent. He was thoughtful. He was more respectful than the lawyers. And I'm thinking, hey, seems okay to me. Maybe there's something wrong with the folks. Except when I looked at him, he looked like a homeless man who hadn't bathed in months. And he kept insisting there was absolutely nothing wrong with him. He did not have any kind of mental health issue, and that if I only would release him, he would go get evaluated, he'd see a psychiatrist, and he would come back. And he said to me, "Judge, it's ridiculous that I've been in here this long. You have really dangerous people that should be in here. I have been charged with this ridiculous offense, and nobody does any time on a charge like this." And he was absolutely correct. I said, "Can I ask you a question?" Now, you have to understand at this time, judges in Florida had absolutely no training on how to identify or deal with people with serious mental illnesses. So I said to him, "Can I ask you a question?" He said, "Of course, Your Honor, anything." I said, "I just don't understand one thing. You keep insisting there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You don't have any type of mental health disorder. And if that's the case, why would a Harvard-educated psychiatrist be homeless and be in jail? I just don't understand." All of a sudden, he got a look on his face that I will not forget to the day I die. It was a look of complete and total terror and fear. And all of a sudden, he started shaking back and forth, and he started cupping his ears, and he started screaming at the top of his lungs, and he started to point to the back of the courtroom where his parents were standing, and he started yelling in sixes, "Your Honor, Your Honor, Your Honor, you have to have the culprit removed, you have to have the culprit removed, you have to have the culprit removed." I said to him, "Aren't those your parents?" "No, no, 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 no. Real parents, real parents, real parents. Died. Holocaust, 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 Holocaust." And they're from the CIA, 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 and they came to kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me. And the only thing that you could hear at that moment was his poor mother crying. Now, the only thing I had been taught, because I had absolutely no education on what to do about these cases, was that if someone acts, quote unquote, strange or bizarre, order a psychological evaluation. I'm telling you, I didn't even know what I was supposed to do with the evaluation when it came back. So I immediately ordered an evaluation. Now he's in jail, 6-8 weeks on possession of a dairy cart. The first evaluation came back and said not only is he incompetent to stand trial, but he actually even met Florida's ridiculously high criteria for involuntary commitment, and that this guy needs to be hospitalized. I'm like, this is great. I'm going to be a hero. I'm going to get this guy help. I'm never going to have to deal with mental illness again. This is in 2000. I needed 3 evaluations at the time to get what we call a stipulation, an agreement from the lawyer, so I ordered 2 more. I don't know, he's now in jail 10, 12 weeks on possession of a dairy cart. All 3 evaluations come back. They all say the same thing, and I'm like, this is great. We're going to help this guy. It's going to be wonderful. I give the evaluations to the lawyers. They immediately stipulate that he's incompetent to proceed. And I begin to order him into involuntary commitment. And all of a sudden, I look down, and the assistant public defender has a grin on her face. And I will tell you, as a former assistant public defender, it's a really bad sign. And then she says to me, I don't know if I have any lawyers. Do I have any lawyers in the audience tonight? So I've got one, so he'll appreciate this. She then said to me, Your Honor, in all due respect. See, when a lawyer says that to a judge, it has nothing to do with respect. That's how they tell us we're idiots without going to trial, to jail. So I said, excuse me, and she whipped out this Florida Supreme Court opinion, which had actually come out 2 months before this incident. Of course, I hadn't read it, because why would I read anything that had to do with mental health? And what did it say? It said that county judges, of which I am, have absolutely no legal authority to involuntarily commit anybody, and that my only option was to do what he had told me 10 weeks earlier, which was to release him back to the street, tell him to go see a doctor, and come back. Floridly psychotic, schizophrenic, meeting criteria for involuntary commitment, even in Florida, I had to release him to the street. I will tell you, you don't go into this job to make decisions like that. I was pretty upset. Not only did I not fulfill the promise I had made his parents, I put him at risk. I probably put the community at risk. God forbid something terrible happened to him, or he did something terrible to someone else, I probably put my job at risk. But I had to follow the law, because that is what I am sworn to do. I went back to my chambers. I was pretty upset. I got on the phone, and I learned 3 very, very valuable lessons that morning. The first lesson I learned is that it turns out that Miami-Dade County actually has the largest percentage of people with serious mental illnesses of any urban area in the United States. So if you want to come down and do research, Dr. Harvey will tell you, it's never a dull moment. 9.1% of our general population lives and suffers with very serious mental illnesses. That's 197,000 adults and 55,000 children. And sadly, when you are 49th or 50th per capita in funding in the great state of Florida, there's a reason we call it DA, and only about 1% of the population gets access to our public system, your jail becomes the largest psychiatric facility in the state. 35% of our inmates were on antipsychotic medication, and believe it or not, we were spending $500,000 a day. It's $180 million a year to warehouse people in this hellhole we called a jail. And until recently, 3.5 of our 9 floors were mental health floors, and because conditions in jails for people with mental illnesses are not conducive for treatment, people in our jail and most jails in the United States with serious mental illnesses stay 4 to 8 times longer at 7 times the cost, more than someone with the exact same charge without a mental illness. And even worse, since 1999, more than 25 people in my community with serious mental illnesses have died during an encounter with the police because the police had not been adequately trained to deal with this crisis either. That was my first lesson. The second lesson I learned is that this was not a local problem or a state problem, but it turns out to be a very serious national problem. Former Surgeon General David Satcher calls mental illness the silent epidemic of our time. I will tell you, if you are in the criminal justice system, there's absolutely nothing silent about this epidemic. We hear their screams and see their cries every single day. And the third lesson, and maybe the most difficult lesson I learned that day, is that our community mental health systems in this country and crisis systems and laws are antiquated, fragmented. They do not reflect modern science and medical research and practices, and they need great, great reform. I've been at this for just over 18 years at this point, and I've reached a very simple conclusion. That if we treated people with primary health issues the way we treated people with mental illnesses, not only would there be a plethora of civil lawsuits, there would probably be indictments for gross negligence. I do not know any other illness that it's okay to discharge people in the middle of the night, floridly psychotic, and then when they don't behave the way that we need them to behave, we arrest them. And I don't know why people aren't angrier about it, because there's simple solutions that really can help people recover. You know, I took my dog to the vet a couple of weeks ago, on a Saturday, of course, because the vet's open on Saturday, not the mental health provider. And, you know, it was no big deal. He was fine. First thing Monday morning at 8 in the morning, the phone rings. It was the vet wanting to know how my dog was. Ask a person with schizophrenia the last time a provider called them after they got released to see how they might be doing. We're treating our animals better than we are our people. If you'd indulge me for one moment, I want to read from an article that I recently reviewed that I think is incredibly telling. The past few years have seen an increasing amount of interest manifested in mental health and psychiatry. The existing legal procedures treat people with mental illnesses as criminals instead of people who are ill. Booking a person with mental illness at a police department or jail is unnecessary and undesirable. Police officers should be replaced by trained representatives of a hospital to effect the transfer of patients from their homes or to hospitals from one hospital to another. All laws concerning mental illness should be integrated to eliminate inefficiency and duplication. In the past, psychiatry has suffered because of its isolation from general medicine. Integrating psychiatry into the general practice of medicine is in line with modern trends of medical education and hospital practice. The article then goes on and talks about this great importance of community education, how we have to educate parents and children and teachers and physicians and judges and jurors, clergy, employers, employees, and the public in general. And these are just a few of the comments and recommendations that were published in the American Journal of Psychiatry in January of 1939, 80 years ago. And so it is so sad and tragic that when we're dealing with mental illness, in many ways we have gone backwards, then moved forward. You know, I don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to get into the whole history, how we got here. Suffice to say, it's a combination of this perfect storm. We closed the hospitals, we defunded housing, we went on the war on drugs and the war on crime. And we had the criminalization of mental illness. The impact has been staggering. In 1955, there were some 560,000 people in state psychiatric hospitals. At around the same time, we estimate there were about 5,000 people with serious mental illnesses in jails and prisons. Today, we have less than 40,000 civil beds. And last year, I just want to make a point. So if nothing changed with the state's civil hospital beds, and I'm not advocating we need to go back to that era at all. I just want to make a very important point. Because I truly believe with the right treatments and supports, most people with these illnesses can live in the community and have good and healthy lives. But if we had kept the same system in place, there'd be about 1.5 million people in state hospitals today, given our population growth. And as I said, we have less than 40,000 beds. It's somewhere closer to about 32,000 beds left. Yet last year, we had 1.5 million people and 2 million incidents arrested with serious mental illnesses. It's almost the exact amount of people who would have been in state hospitals. And so the point being is that there are two horrible ironies. Number one is we never deinstitutionalized. What we did is we transferred responsibilities from these really horrible, terrible hospitals to these really horrible, terrible jails. And in some ways, we've made it worse because now not only do you have to deal with having the stigma of having a serious mental illness, now you have to have the stigma of being a criminal with mental illness. So it's harder to get housing, it's harder to get employment. You end up hanging around with real criminals and learning really bad activities. And the second and sadder cruel irony is that we have come full circle because 200 years ago in this country, we put people in jails with mental illnesses. And that's what we are doing again today. It is the one area in civil rights we have actually lost ground on and moved backwards. And the consequences could not be more stark. We have seen homelessness increase. We've seen police injuries increase. We've seen police shootings of people with mental illnesses increase. We've wasted critical tax dollars. And in many ways, we have made mental illness a crime in this country. In the great state of Florida, the police actually initiate more involuntary examinations under what we call our Baker Act than the total number of arrests that they make for robbery, burglary, and grand theft auto combined. And if this wasn't disturbing enough, just consider the fiscal impact that this is having on our local and state budgets. When we started our project to change the way we were dealing with this population, we wanted to see if we could get our arms around the people that were the highest utilizers of criminal justice and mental health services. At the University of South Florida in Tampa, they have this great institute called the Florida Mental Health Institute. And they're one of the only institutions in the United States that can actually tell a community who the highest utilizers of criminal justice and mental health services are. So we sent them the names of about 3,100 people that had been arrested in Miami-Dade that we knew had serious mental illness because they had come through our system. And they have access to all of the arrests in Florida, all the involuntary commitments in Florida, all the Medicaid and Medicare records. So I said, okay, maybe they'll reduce it down to about 1,000 people, but that would be a pretty decent start for us to figure out where we should be focusing our resources on so we could get a better bang for the buck. So we wait, and finally this letter arrives. It's pretty thin. I open it up, and there's one piece of paper. And on this one piece of paper are the names of 97 people, primarily men, primarily diagnosed with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, primarily homeless, and primarily co-occurring, who over a 5-year period, these 97 people were arrested 2,200 times. They spent 27,000 days in the Dade County Jail, 13,000 days at a state-supported psychiatric facility, cost taxpayers $13.7 million, and we got absolutely nothing for it. We joke, but it's true, we would have been better off sending them to Harvard. They would have had an education, they would have had a roof over their head, they would not have been getting in trouble so much, and the outcomes probably would have been better. This is the insanity of our system. And if you want to know where the real money is being spent in this arena, it's not in the community. It's in competency restoration. The states now spend billions of dollars because the only entitlement to treatment in the United States is if you're arrested. Because under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, everyone is entitled to a fair trial. And if you're incompetent to proceed, you can't get a fair trial. So what do? The states have no choice. They send people who are incompetent to stand trial, mostly on felonies in my state, and some states for both misdemeanors and felonies. And they spend enormous amounts of money to restore people so we can try them. In my own state of Florida, we spend almost 22% of the entire adult mental health budget to restore competency for about 2,500 people, while at the same time we have between 120 and 130,000 people a year who at the time of their arrest need acute mental health care treatment. But 22% of our entire budget goes to restore people so we could try them. And guess what happens to 70% of those individuals? Either the charges are dropped, they get credit for time served, or they get probation. Very few of them are committing heinous offenses that land them in prison. And they walk out the front door of the courthouse without any access to treatment. And in many days and times, they get arrested within minutes because they're floridly psychotic again, and we've done nothing to help them in their recovery. You know, it's actually the definition of insanity, where we keep doing the same thing again and again and we expect a different outcome. And if you think that's bad, just consider the impact on our prisons. Most states are seeing a leveling out of their prison population in the United States, but not for its mental health population. So in Florida, over the last 12 years, we've seen about a 50% increase in the number of people going to prison. But for people with mental illnesses, it's grown by about 178%. Now, they're not committing heinous offenses. The average stay for a prisoner in Florida with a serious mental illness is only 2.5 to 4 years. They accumulate points because they pick up a lot of these quality of life offenses and eventually end up in prison. It's growing so fast in Florida that if we don't do something on a statewide basis immediately, Florida's going to have to build 10 new prisons over the next 10 years just to house its mental health population. Well, the cost to build and operate 10 new prisons over 10 years in Florida is about $2.2 billion. There is something wrong with a society that's willing to spend more money to incarcerate people who are ill than to treat them. So where do we start? This is what makes it interesting and difficult. Because as they say, if you've seen one community mental health system, you've seen one community mental health system. It's county by county in this country, and it makes it very difficult. There's no switch that we can flip to fix this entire system. And so we have started a national initiative called Stepping Up, with the National Association of Counties, the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, and the Council of State Governments. More than 400 counties over the last couple of years have passed resolutions saying that they're not going to continue to do business as they've been doing it, and we're going to change the way we are doing and changing this horrible situation. And so while more and more judges are becoming involved, the reality is that nobody can fix this alone. It really takes a collaboration of the traditional and non-traditional stakeholders in this arena. And while this is a public safety issue, the vast majority of people with serious mental illnesses are much more likely to be victims of serious crimes than perpetrators. For many years in my own community, there was recognition that our mental health forensic system was pretty much a disaster. And so we began the reforms in June of 2000 by holding this wonderful summit. And I will tell you, probably the best thing about being a judge is that when I invite people to a meeting, they actually come, even if they don't want to be there. And so after I had this horrible situation with the psychiatrist, I sent a letter and I invited all these people to come, and everybody showed up. And I will tell you, 23 years ago, when I was an assistant public defender, I told you that my age corresponds to the deinstitutionalization movement. I was chief of our county court division in the public defender's office, and I noticed for the first time we had clients with mental illnesses. That had never happened before. And so, of course, what had happened was the state hospital that I had visited 43 years ago had closed down. And nobody told us, and nobody provided them with treatment, and so they started getting arrested. And so naively, as the chief of the division, I sent a letter to all these important people, and I asked them to come and talk about what we were going to do about this problem. I went to the meeting, not one person showed up. I said, okay, maybe they didn't send the letters out. Just a public defender, what are you going to do? Well, 3 years later, I was appointed to the bench. We had this horrible situation with the psychiatrist. I took the same letter, I put it on my new stationery, and they got there early. But what we did, what was so wonderful, is we literally mapped out for a half a day how the criminal justice system intersected with the community mental health system. And what we found is that it did not, that we were embarrassingly dysfunctional. Us so-called healthy, sane people had developed a system that was designed to fail. And again, then we punish people when they don't behave the way we want them to behave. And so out of this event, we came up with a 3-part system. Initially a 2-part. And we said, look, we can't keep doing this the way we've been doing it. And we came up with a simple theme that read, diversion and linkages to comprehensive care makes jail the last resort. And the first thing we did is we decided we needed to stop the flow of people with mental illnesses coming in. So we looked around the country, and clearly the best system for people with serious mental illnesses by the police is a program called Crisis Intervention Team Policing. It's a 40-hour training program that teaches law enforcement how to identify people who are very ill, how to de-escalate, and where to take them as opposed to arresting them. Now, it wasn't easy to begin with. The last thing that the police wanted was some civilian judge to tell them how to do their job. Fortuitously, after a grand jury report came out about this issue, after that video came out, it basically was an indictment of the police for not going along with this project. And we have now been able to get all 36 of our police departments trained in crisis intervention team policing. We have the largest trained squad of police officers in the United States. We have over 6,500 law enforcement officers trained in CIT. And it has been a huge cultural shift. We keep data on every single mental health call the 2 largest agencies make. And between 2010 through 2017, those 2 agencies handled 83,427,000 mental health calls. And out of those 83,427,000 calls, they only made 149 arrests. When we started this project, the number of arrests in Dade County was at 118,000. Today, it is 56,000. The audit, the number of people in our jail went from 73 to 7,400 to 4,000 today. So great that we actually were able to close one of our 3 main jails at an actual savings of over $12 million a year. And what's been remarkable is the reaction of law enforcement, because it turns out they are suffering too. The woman that coordinates my CIT program gets 150 calls a month from police for their own personal mental health issues. There was a study last year that said police officers get 6 to 9 times more cortisol a day than we do. They are suffering from PTSD in ways that we had not even imagined. So bad that we had to set up a separate track of treatment for our police because they won't go to their departments for help. But we knew just setting up a pre-arrest system wasn't going to be enough. So we initially set up a post-arrest diversion program. So if you got arrested on a misdemeanor, no more ordering all these expensive evaluations to kick people to the curb. What we did is we set up a new system, a new assessment in the jail. And if you met criteria for hospitalization, we would transfer you within 3 days of an arrest to one of our crisis units, to Dr. Harvey on a daily basis, and we would treat people. And because they were on a criminal hold, we'd reset the case for a couple of weeks and really give them the time they needed to recover. And then instead of just kicking them back, we'd put them in a program and we would help them get a soft landing back into the community. We have 8 peers that work for the court now. 4 of them are graduates of the program. And so if they agree to go to the program, they go from the facility to the courtroom, not the jail. The peers waiting for them with their medication, clothes, food, an appointment, transportation, housing, benefits. Our recidivism rate of a misdemeanor division went from about 72% to 20%. It worked out so great that our state attorney, Kathy Fernandez-Rundle, allowed us to expand the program to our felony division. The felony program has saved the county 31,000 days so far. That's 84 years of jail bed days, because treatment works. And we have to give people a warm handoff. We also set up a diversion program for forensic competency. So instead of just focusing on restoration and kicking people back to the curb, we now focus on a program for people that are not looking at prison. We focus on community reintegration, and then when they're stable, we put them in our felony diversion program, and we monitor them for another year, and we drop the charges in most of the cases so that we're not criminalizing their mental illness. As a result, we've improved public safety, we've reduced police injuries, we help police officers get back to patrol much quicker, we've saved critical tax dollars, we've saved lives, and we've decriminalized mental illness. But we still have plenty to do, because as good and as successful as all of this has been, it's limited, because our state's mental health systems are still too fragmented, they're still antiquated, and they are painfully under-resourced. And the laws are old, and they don't reflect the science today, which is why we're in the process of developing the very first of its kind mental health diversion facility. We actually expect to begin construction within the next 3 to 4 weeks. It'll be a one-stop shop facility for the most acutely ill, and it'll be a medical home. So we will have a receiving facility, we'll have a crisis unit, a short-term residential facility, we'll have a primary health unit, we will have a dental, we will have eye, we will have tattoo removal, because people in psychosis do silly things. We will have a day activity program run by people with mental illnesses to teach self-sufficiency. We will have a culinary supportive employment program so that we can teach people skills so that when they leave, they actually can get employed again. And we will have housing so they can stay for a year, which is what they probably need. And we will give them all the supports, including trauma services, so that when they leave us, we don't kick them to the curb, but we gently and warmly return them to the community with all the supports that they need to stay in recovery. The current shortcomings of our community mental health system, our justice system, they did not arise recently, and they did not arise as a result of any one stakeholder, one party, or one individual, or one institution. None of us created this problem alone, and none of us will be able to fix this problem. It truly takes a collaboration. And I'm hopeful that once we get this facility open and we continue to do what we're doing, that we'll finally achieve what the United States Supreme Court asked us to do when they ordered the deinstitutionalization of our hospitals. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer a few questions if you have any. Now, I will throw one out to you. One of the things that we're looking to do is I am on a group that is looking to modernize our involuntary hospitalization laws. And we're looking for a couple good neurologists or scientists that want to help us, show us, and teach us where we are with science so we can try to get laws that actually reflect what you know. There is such a disconnect between what you're learning and what you have and what we know and where the laws are. There is a 50-year-old gap. In fact, most of the involuntary commitment laws in this country are actually based on 17th century English common law of dangerousness. And that's still basically the root of most of our laws. It's not that most of these people are dangerous to themselves or others. They're dangerous to their brain, which is rotting because we're not letting them get treated. And we see them get worse every single day. And so if anybody is interested, see me afterwards, because really would love to be able to rely on the great brain power in this room and help us modernize our laws so that we can make sure that we're treating people humanely, but also not letting them get so sick that they become permanent wards of the state and they live out on the street. And we decide that that's normal and we walk past them every single day thinking no big deal. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, yesterday I had probably the worst and best day on the bench in many, many years. We've been able to help so many of the people, about 80% of the people in my community that come into jail with these serious mental illnesses. But about 20% are so acutely ill, they will not volunteer for treatment, and our program's voluntary. So yesterday, I released about 6 people that were floridly psychotic back to the street. And then an hour later, we had a different calendar I was doing, and we were able to get the law changed a couple years ago where we gave county court criminal judges the authority to use assisted outpatient laws for the most severely ill that keep recycling through the system. And we had our first calendar yesterday of people that have been on AOT for about 2 months. Now, these are people that had been ill for decades. And I have to tell you, and it should encourage you in your own work, they had come back. They were human beings. They were smiling. They were talking. They understood what was going on. They were happy to have their lives back again for the first time in decades. But it shouldn't be the minority of the cases that I am handling. It should be the rule, not the exception. Well, I'll let you go to the reception if there are no questions. Thank you all very, very much.